Yes, like he said, we are the BSU rate catchers. This is our solar installation proposal for the UFL district use case. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. Just a quick introduction to our team. We are all electrical engineering majors here at Boise State. Seniors, we are participating in this competition as part of a senior design class. And under each of our names is each of the parts of the project that we focused on. And our instructor and our advisors for this class are listed below, Professor Brian Higgins and Dr. Andres Valdepena. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. And now I'll pass the torch off to Lisa to talk about the district goals.
Awesome, thank you, Josh. So I'm going to talk more about the district goals. Next slide, please. All right, so some of the goals for the district, which is UFL, is to become carbon neutral starting in 2025. They also want to offset their peak demand at the lowest cost and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the district, which means implementing renewable energy methods like solar onto the campus. Some of the constraints we had to keep in mind as a team is that on-campus generation is limited to 4 megawatts by the Florida Public Service Commission. Also, PPAs are not allowed in the state of Florida. So these goals and constraints served as a high-level roadmap for us throughout this design process. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to talk more about the conceptual design. Next slide, please. Okay, so our design narrative started with establishing a target of designing a minimalist photovoltaic system that offsets peak demand and reduce demand charges. So in order to accomplish this goal, we really had to look at all the buildings in the district, survey them, and figure out what buildings we wanted solar on, what we didn't want solar, and what kind of design we were shooting for. So the first major decision we made was not to put solar on any historical buildings. We really wanted to preserve the historical district and maintain the campus aesthetics. We also decided against ground mount solar because removing trees would require a lot of permissions, and also we wanted to align with the master plan of ecological restoration and leave those conservation areas undisturbed. So that leaves us with the design that is comprised of roof-mounted solar and carports. As for modeling tools, we mainly used Helioskope and SAM iteratively throughout that whole design process. Next slide, please. All right, this is just an overview of our solar design. As you can see on the right there, we have 4 array sites. We have the physics building, the rights union, and the bookstore, garage 14 and garage 9 north and south. And on the table to the left there, we have each array site with some breakdown of the DC system size in kilowatts, the annual production in megawatt hours, and some of those racking details, where all are at a 5-degree fixed tilt. That leaves us with a total DC system size of 1.71 megawatts and total annual production of 2,582.35 megawatt hours. Next slide, please. For our equipment, we wanted to keep things simple and just stick with a couple companies, mainly because we were concerned about the procurement timeline and gathering equipment might take a long time. So we were able to just stick with some simple companies for our selection. We have the Trina solar panels, which are rated at 400 watts, and those are located on the physics, rights union, and bookstore sites. Then we have AE Solar, which is rated at 700 watts, and those are used on the carports for garages 14 and garage 9 north and south. For our inverters, we went with this SMA Sunny Tri-Power STP series, and we originally thought about microinverters and DC optimizers, but because of financial constraints, and most of our sites were already pretty well exposed, so shading wasn't really a concern. We just stuck with the string inverter. For the racking options for the roof mount, we are using the Iron Ridge tilt mount system. And on the right there is a picture of the flat roof attachment and the rails. And then for the other carport, we are using the Parasol single tilt garage carport, also shown to the right there in that picture. Next slide, please. This is showing how we were able to meet our goal of really reducing that monthly demand charge for the district. So as you can see in the blue, we have the monthly demand with the system, which is less than the monthly demand without the system. So we were able to accomplish our goal and save UFL finances in terms of their electricity bill. Next slide, please. All right, and now I'll pass it on to Chris to talk about the distribution impact.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. Thank you. So in this table, we have a breakdown of the DC kilowatts for each building. Garage 14 has 574 kilowatt DC. The physics building has 149.2 kilowatts. Garage 9 has 537.6 kilowatts. And the Reach Union and Bookstore combined have a 451.6 kilowatts. Each of these is around a node with a max hosting PV capacity of 700 kVAs, so we anticipate no impact to the grid from this. Next slide, please. We did have some missing heat map data for the nodes on Garage 14 and 9 north and south, but we assume that both of these nodes are 700 kVAs, as all other garage with heat map data contain 700 kVA nodes. So we're working off that as an assumption. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Josh for the finances.
Thank you for moving the slides along. Starting off with the financial metrics, the total cost of these four PV arrays will come just shy of $3.5 million. We elected to do a cash purchase, the justification for that being that if we did any sort of financing, it would increase the overall cost of the project and thus reduce the savings of that the university would receive. That cost comes from an average cost of $1.97 watt DC, with a total 25-year NPV term, 25-year term NPV of just shy of $800,000, and the project IRR of 7.5%. Go ahead and move to the next slide. Next slide, please. So to achieve that IRR of 7.5%, we had the metric given to us in the financial model as the PPA price. It's important to note, earlier in the presentation, we said that PPAs are not allowed as given by the UFL use case document. And from my understanding, this PPA is strictly the cost of the energy due to the cost of the system based on the amount that it's the production that we are receiving. You can see that the MPV 25-year term for the physics building is slightly in the negative, and that is not a concern because of the production that we are receiving from particularly the garages, because they produce more than they consume. So that can be shifted over to the physics to even that out. And next slide, please. Now I'll turn the time over to Eli to talk about the development plan.
Yep, hi there, I'm Eli. I'm going to be talking about the development plan. So first off, we have the authority having jurisdiction, zoning, and environmental considerations. The authority having jurisdiction is the state of Florida, IIF, and the zoning. The majority of the use case is zoned as educational services. However, Garage 9 north and south at the southernmost point of the use case is zoned as medical services because it is kind of grouped into the complex that associates the VA hospital down to the southeast of it. And environmental issues, if you consult the FEMA flood services tool, the picture in the middle shows a floodplain through the middle of the southern half of the district use case. Being that we use roof mount systems and systems on top of garages, this isn't really a concern, but it could affect construction, and that would just look like rerouting traffic around a potential flood during the time of construction to get to Garage 4 in particular. The other thing that we definitely took into account was the conservation areas. According to the UFL Campus Master Plan 2020 to 2030, nearly every outcropping of trees is considered a conservation area. So we were very mindful of array placement out of shading. That way we didn't have to cut down any trees, and we avoided any issues or red tape that came along with getting the approval to get those trees cut down. Next slide, please. So this is the code, standards, and permits. All codes and standards shall be followed throughout this project. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They must be followed. And looking at the permits, there's the Duke Energy interconnection permit, the University of Florida permits, that'd be electrical and building permits, and the City of Gainesville permits as well. Those are electrical and building permits. Next slide, please. So looking at the project timeline, the project proposal is expected to take about a month and a half, community outreach as well, about a month and a half, proposal evaluation, about a month, acquiring permits, about 2 months. It's important to note that acquiring permits and the Duke Energy interconnection permit line up simultaneously. This is because they're both, permitting phases, but the Duke Energy interconnection permit's expected to take about 6 months. They list it'll take 60 days, but according to our advisor, Dr. Valdepena, that doesn't hold true. So he said to put 6 months because, that's usually how long an interconnection process takes. So the procurement and the interconnection process can align because at this point we've received the green light after the proposal evaluation, so we can start placing orders. The construction phase, ideally the contract would be awarded to a contractor with large enough manpower to construct every site simultaneously, and each site's expected to take about 3 months. After that, we have commissioning, and this is all the final inspections, testing, and subsequent training, and that'll be 2 weeks. So total project timeline would be 11 months, 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So as far as the community impact, like Lisa said, we decided to not put any solar arrays on historical buildings in order to avoid ruffling any feathers potentially and maintaining the campus aesthetic. And also the project would provide jobs for the community, and this would be anywhere from entry-level jobs to certification required jobs, such as being an electrician. So there'd be a whole range of jobs provided and to be taken advantage of by the surrounding community. As well as education about solar throughout the community outreach process referenced earlier in the project timeline. And then looking at the campus impact itself, we propose that it should be constructed throughout the summer to limit the campus impact. And if this isn't possible, then we would stage the construction to finish the highly trafficked areas first. So that'd be the garages and the student union building. So we get those out of the way so that we don't affect student life, any further. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to NREL for organizing this competition. Thank you to my team members for all their hard work. And thank you to our advisors for being with us every step of the way and providing insight and knowledge that we don't have, or we do now. But yeah, thank you to everybody, and I'll open it up for questions now. Thank you.